We meet here today as Lebanon is experiencing really serious economic and political problems, and as the political process in the country suffers from a long stalemate after more than 16 months of a presidential vacuum, and as threats of a war between Israel and Hezbollah increase by the day. Indeed, the skirmishes in the south and Israeli bombardment everywhere in Lebanon, come to think of it, have killed hundreds of people and caused serious damage and destruction to homes along the border and even much deeper inside Lebanon. Just as serious is the seeming absence of the Lebanese state and institutions at this particular time to help defend the country or be in the forefront of devising ways to avoid all-out war. Today, His Excellency Mr. Mneimneh will provide some perspectives from inside Lebanon and on what's happening with on the border with Israel and some other issues. I leave that up to my colleague Patricia to pursue. Just in the way of identification, Mr. Ibrahim Mneimneh is an architect and urban planning expert with experience in urban design and management of projects, with wide experience in Lebanon, the Middle East, the Gulf states, Morocco, and Central Asian countries. He holds a master's degree in urban planning from the American University of Beirut and a bachelor's degree in architecture from Beirut Arab University. His political activism began basically in 2015. I'm sure it began before, but it came really evident during the waste and refuse crisis in Lebanon that resulted in a series of protests. In 2016, he was one of the initial founders of the organization Beirut Madinati. Beirut is my city. For the Beirut municipal elections, where he headed the campaign list, winning about 40% of the vote. That was really a feat at the time, and which sowed the seeds of his candidacy in the 2018 parliamentary elections. He ran again for office in 2022 with Beirut Tuqawim, a progressive electoral campaign, and with Beirut at the year, one of the two opposition lists in Beirut's second constituency. His electoral program included holding the political establishment accountable for the Beirut port explosion of 2020, ending political clientelism, eradicating Lebanon's sectarian governmental framework, and replacing it with a secular, democratic, and just system. In 2022 election, His Excellency made a breakthrough that few observers had anticipated when he won more than 13,000 preferential votes and was elected to one of the Sunni seats in Beirut's second constituency. Without further ado, I will yield the floor to my colleague Patricia Karam, who is a senior fellow here at the Arab Center, non-resident fellow, and she will engage with His Excellency in what my colleague Khalil Jahshan here calls the art of conversation.
Well, thank you, Imad, and thank you, Khalil, and the Arab Center for having us. The way I envisaged this was to be a sort of an initial conversation between us, and then we will open it up for questions and answers. During the Q&A, I will ask you, if possible, to identify yourself before sort of making a comment and or an intervention. And let me start, and I will, Ibrahim, I will start. My questions will start maybe from the more general to the more specific, because I'm also very interested in sort of your career, your motivations, how you got to Parliament. But as a reminder, the conversation is also on the record. So first, from your sort of unique vantage point and your work as a parliamentarian, and also as part of this change cohort, what really is your perspective now on how the Gaza war is affecting Lebanon, and really the possibility, some would also say inevitability, of war with Lebanon? And connected to that, maybe you can tell us a bit what people inside the country are saying and doing, and how does sort of Hezbollah's involvement against Israel affect domestic politics in this regard?
Well, thank you, Patricia. Thank you, Arab Center, for hosting. Well, we can start a little bit just by describing the situation that's happening now in Lebanon. I think it's very evident that the situation is very critical. And unfortunately, that the kind of war that is happening, I wouldn't call it skirmishes, it's really an actual war that's happening in the south. Villages are being destroyed, over 100,000 of displaced people we have from the south, and it qualifies as a war for me per se. However, the situation has not gone out of hand totally, and I think there's some kind of a balance that is happening here, some kind of rule of engagement, that the way I see it is Israel trying to always expand on that and pushing the limits and taking advantage actually from the situation that internally we are very fragile on several fronts, and that will somehow restrain Hezbollah from going into a full-fledged war. So this kind of balance right now has resulted in a lot of uncertainty. We have a lot of polarization. People are very weary of what could happen. And it's triggering a lot of political anticipation that, and somehow we see that it's also taking the country to a situation where it's becoming really, how do I say this, critical at the political and political level per se. The polarization that's taking place as a reaction to the south, the war in the south, I believe is something that we should really address very seriously. It is creating a social fracture that I'm afraid will stay there for many years to come. A lot of mistrust, a lot of fragmentation, and this is something we have to work together as Lebanese to, after the war, to discuss seriously how we can prevent this or remedy this fractures that we are suffering from. These bruises will stay there for a long time, and my worry is that if we continue in this situation, or God forbid we go into a full-fledged war, it will be more engraved and more accentuated, and the fear of the kind of separationist discourse will be on the rise, and we see this already happening. I think it is a responsibility of the political parties and all the political groups and the Lebanese as a whole, in all their diversity, to come together after this war and sit at a table and really discuss how we can be united at two levels. First, the defense strategy on how to protect Lebanon, and what would be our stand regarding the Palestinian issue. Because these two issues are two different things, and we need to come together and to be united around strategy and approach to those under the ceiling of the Constitution and national unity. We need to be very clear, and we need to be very honest with each other and address the concerns of each other as Lebanese, and come and unite over these two strategies. These are, I think, the two main entry points if there should be some lessons learned from what happened today in the South.
Can you just drill down a little bit on this idea of the polarization and sort of the concerns of both sides? I mean, you've talked about it in generic terms. Can you maybe be more specific about this?
Well, in terms of concerns, we already know that the South has suffered historically from a lot of the Israeli attacks and aggressions. And there was a kind of how do I say this? Negligence from the central government to that over the years. This has created a lot of mistrust, and feel that a kind of marginalization took place for the southern people, which was taken advantage of by Hezbollah to create a narrative where they can portray themselves as the protector of the South. Of course, Hezbollah as a resistance movement at the time where the South was occupied contributed to the liberation of our territory. This is for sure. But after that, when we come and discuss the concerns of the Lebanese of how we can best protect our country, that's a different discussion. And I think all Lebanese are concerned with that. All Lebanese factions should take part in this and decide what kind of strategy we can best work together to provide this protection, and at the same time, what are the costs that we are able to pay for such a defense strategy and protection. This is from one side. From the other side, the concerns are basically that mostly the Christian political parties, traditional Christian political parties, are concerned about the legitimacy of the kind of defense strategy that is happening right now by default through Hezbollah. And this is something that I think is, of course, a serious and a legitimate concern that we should address, that we have a constitution, we have institutions that are, as per constitution, required to protect the country from all foreign attacks or threats. And this is something that it threatens the whole integrity of the and the social contract actually between us as Lebanese and and our government. This is and the state, because if we are not all able to يعني احتكام يعني نحتكم sorry educate يعني لا for us to have a reference as a constitution on how we can resolve our differences in a democratic way and decide in a democratic way what is the best solution or the best course of protection and other issues, then we are really challenging the constitution itself and accordingly the country's integrity, okay, and the concept of Lebanon as a country. And that's a legitimate concern. And from that side, I say that we should be addressing these two concerns and come out through national dialogue where we can resolve these two particular issues if we are really deciding, or we decided as Lebanese, that we want to maintain this country. No one can take a lead on or enforce any kind of strategy or decision or choices on the Lebanese without going through the constitutional institutions.
I'll come back to that, but let me ask you now, sort of going back to sort of the Gaza war and the possibility of war with Lebanon and Israel. What do you think of current efforts, the US, the French, and otherwise, to try to de-escalate the situation? Can they be effective? Is Hezbollah likely to play along? And adding to that also this question of the framework that has been used, has been UN Resolution 1701. And I'm interested in knowing whether you think that it is feasible to kind of use the 1701 framework, especially taking into account that it's really no close to fulfillment than on the day that it was passed. And you might disagree with that, but...
I think 1701 as a Lebanese state, we have always been committed to Security Council resolutions, and specifically 1701, which was the resolution that ended the war in 2006. And for us as Lebanese, I think it is to our interest that we hold on to that resolution and push for its implementation. And right now, I think if we put this on the table, it is the entry point to find a ceasefire in the south, because at the end of the day, Israel was breaching that resolution, and from the other side, there have been always also some breaches from the other side, from Hezbollah, and we have to come to a place where we put these two issues on the table, and with international community's help, and specifically the United States and the French, where we can come to a ceasefire based on 1701. And this is something, I think, to the best interest of the Lebanese. Not particularly the demarcation of the critical points or the challenge points at the boundaries. This is not the real issue for me. I think this is something technical that could be resolved. It was never actually the main critical or the main contested issue. But I think what we need to acknowledge is that there is some a situation on the ground. There is an actual fact now. Hezbollah is there. It is taking advantage of certain situation and taking initiative and military actions in certain ways. And this needs to be addressed at the core, because for us as Lebanese, it's no more a question of protecting Lebanon at this point in time. This, what Hezbollah is doing in certain ways, is different from what Hezbollah portrayed as themselves as the protector of the South. Now it's taking initiative beyond that point. And this will lead us to another issue. It's leading us to the issue of what is the actual role of Hezbollah arms. This is something we need to deconstruct. And for me, I see it's playing two roles at this point in time. First is what they portray themselves as protecting the Lebanese, protecting the South, and another one supporting the Palestinian cause. And these are two different issues for me as a Lebanese that we need to address separately. Protecting Lebanon and devising a defense strategy is one thing that we can agree on under the ceiling of the constitutional institutions and the Lebanese government. This is a national unity. This is something we can work. We can take advantage of whatever if we have powers, whether Hezbollah arms or not, but under the ceiling of having the exclusivity of decision of war and peace in the hand of the Lebanese government. This is something we can do. But on another track, what would be our position from the Palestinian cause? Now that's a different issue. How can we support the Palestinian rights is also something we need to figure out as Lebanese. We cannot, again, impose certain choices by force on all Lebanese. There are some processes, and there's a democratic process where we can convince and push for our proposal as political parties on how we can address this issue, because I think we are very much related to it. We have to take part of, we have to have a stand from that issue, and it's affecting us in Lebanese, and we cannot dissociate ourselves from that. But what it would be, and what kind of support can we do as Lebanese for the Palestinian cause? This is something we need to discuss. This is something we need to articulate, and we need to agree on democratically within us as Lebanese.
And I'm sure we'll come back to this during the Q&A. I want to just shift a little bit to talk about, there's a reality today, an unfortunate reality of a political vacuum. And so on the one hand, a question is, how are any efforts to de-escalate tensions, negotiate, or secure an agreement to demarcate the border with Israel, etc., how is this supposed to evolve? How are these supposed to evolve without a president and fully empowered government on the one hand? And if you can just link this to maybe tell us a little bit where efforts to elect a president stand, what are the dynamics? There are kind of some dynamics involving the Quint countries that really met not so long ago and reaffirmed their determination to support the election or facilitate the election. What does it mean? What should they be doing? And finally, what will it take to get a candidate to your liking? Taking into account that any candidate, because of the way the system works, needs to be palatable to all, given that we're operating on a consensus based system of politics. So I'll leave,
Okay, but
good luck.
And if I forget one of the questions, remind me.
I'll remind you.
I think, yeah. So I'll start from the end. After the establishment of a certain kind of a power balance within the last election session at the parliament, there was a total stalemate. And for me, I think that the two political camps, whether resistance camp from one side or the sovereign political forces from the other, they have their own ambition, and they have their own kind of bets on time that certain dynamics will change regionally that might play in their favor. But I think, from what I see, this, and I've said it many times in the media and with meetings with them, that we don't have, as Lebanese, any privilege of time right now. The damage that is causing this stalemate is, in my opinion, it's irreversible. This integration of the governmental institutions, the migration, the deterioration of the living standards, the interference of regional forces, it's all increasing, and we have so many things are changing on the ground, and we don't have the privilege of time. We don't have that. We need to come to a consensus, and we have to agree that no camp is able to force a president or push for a president 100% to either of the camps. So this is something that they need to acknowledge. Unfortunately, until today, we don't have a roadmap that will put this mechanism of consensus on track. So far, the only negotiation happening is like tossing names candidates from here and there and testing of names from the quintet even or from other players. And for me, I think this is not going to lead anywhere, because the core issue behind the candidates that the camps are the two camps are requiring are not being discussed. And since they are not they will not get their own candidates elected, then it means that the core issues or the critical issues that they have in mind and want a clear position from the elected president has not been articulated. Like, for example, from the side of the resistance camp, they need to understand. Maybe one of the issues they want is what is their position from Hezbollah's arms. So this is something the coming president will have to say. And Nasrallah said it. Sayyid Nasrallah said it many times. He needs to be loyal. They will not take any backstabbing from any president, they said. And from the other side, the sovereign forces, political forces, they are expecting a president who will push back on the agenda of the Hezbollah arms. So we have very contradicting agendas here. Okay, and these two core issues, if they are, they're not the only issues, but they're an example of the contradicting agendas, and we're not able to reach middle ground on this to reflect the power balance within the parliament that we have. Okay, so if there is an agreement that no camp will be able to deliver their own candidate with 100% of their agenda reflected in them to presidency, then we have to have a roadmap where we can reach a consensus on what is the agenda of the president. And here I can sense that we have, at least for me, you asked me what of my liking. For me, I'm as a deputy, I think we have 6 or 7 points that the president will have to address at this critical turning point in the life of our country. One of them, and to start with, is the issue of the defense strategy and Hezbollah arms. And this is something the president will need to address. This is something the president will need to initiate a national dialogue around it. Okay, we need to reach an agreement on it, because we cannot continue with the same situation as we have before, and we are paying highly and dearly for this every time through this social fracture between the Lebanese, and we're not able to this causing a lot of charging and polarization. This is very costly. The second point would be the IMF program and the financial reforms. This is also something very critical. And here I can tell you very clearly that all the political establishment are against it, are against any reform. So this is something the president will have to have a stand on that, and we need to agree what kind of reforms we want, what kind of economy we will not, what kind of banking system and sector we need. This is a question that the president will have to address as well with the government. Okay. Thirdly, we need, of course, implementation of political reform as per Taif Accord. This is something we also need. We need to improve our system. There was a roadmap laid down by Taif, okay, and it's a very good starting point towards a secular state, okay, and we need to start implementing that. We're already 30 years late for that. So it's about time for us to improve and develop our system in a way that becomes more stable, more representative, and more democratic. And this is something I think the Lebanese need. Not many talk about it, but I think it's very crucial for this president at this particular point in time for Lebanon to really push for a reform agenda, political reform agenda as well. We have also the investigation in the port explosion. Again, for me, this is not just a simple case. It is a case where we can say if Lebanon will ever have justice or not. It's as big as that. If a country like Lebanon will have justice in it, then we need to reach results in this investigation. It's something we cannot brush under the rug. في عنا بعد, there's also the issue of independent judiciary law. Something being discussed in parliament. I think it has lost a lot of the good potential it had because, again, traditional political parties and establishment, they don't want an independent judiciary. شوهوه يعني, it's been really distorted, the law. And they disregarded most of the Venice Commission's talking the remarks and points. And I think this has really downgraded the draft that's being discussed in the parliament right now. Lastly, I think we have the role of Lebanon within the region and the relationship with the Arab countries and its surrounding and to international communities. The new president will have to have good relations and to be able to restore the good relationships that we had with all countries. So, في 5 or 6 points that I think many of them, the political parties will disagree on, but it is the starting point to initiate a discussion and reach a settlement on those points. Maybe facilitated also by the quintet. This is a role that the quintet can do to facilitate discussion between Lebanese on these 5-6 points, okay? And they can, after we agree on a settlement on that, name a president that will carry this agenda and implement it and will be responsible to implement this agenda and with the guarantees from the quintet. This is a kind of roadmap that I think will have a clear mechanism of reaching systematically a settlement and then electing a president that would reflect the power balance, as I said, in the parliament. So these are key points that I think are critical for Lebanese and for the president, and they can mark a second kind of improvement and accumulation of progress for the Lebanese. This is something we need to restore hope in our country, and that I think it would be a healthy starting point to be able to accept that we need to create settlements between us as Lebanese, but we commit to it and we implement it.
Let me pick up on, you mentioned, thank you, by the way.
Did I miss? I think I missed a few questions about it.
I'll get back to them, but because you picked up on,
I'm sure I won't.
You talked about the IMF, right?
Hey.
And we remain, Lebanon remains in a state, the state of, I know Lebanon has currently bigger fish to fry, but at the same time, the situation of economic collapse is a reality. And I'm curious, as are there discussions still happening in Parliament around these reforms, whether it's IMF or otherwise? And relatedly, can you maybe connect that to giving us a sense of, because I know that you're a more sort of positive and hopeful person, tell us a little bit how this works in Parliament, given that what we see right now is not a lot of progress on the economic front.
There is no progress.
How do you see, so maybe tell us a little bit about that and maybe contrast that to other areas where you feel there can be progress, and how do you go about doing that tactically?
Oh, okay, so the financial reform track has been on hold for the past 1.5 years, almost now. And I don't see that there is any intention by the majority of the parliament and the traditional political establishment groups or parties to implement any of the reforms, financial reforms, specifically those required by the IMF. Because, let's face it, these political parties, to be honest, they have their very much narrow interest in relationship to a lot of the oligarchy and a lot of the bankers lobby, okay? And this is preventing the reforms. And from what I've seen in parliament, all political parties, without exception, are allied in that front. This is a bit ironic when you see in other fronts how much they're divided and how much it's severe the division. But when it comes to the financial reforms, they are all united 100% on this issue. And unfortunately, any discussion on that file is not even allowed. And you've seen recently a draft plan by the government that's not able to reach even the Council of Ministers to discuss it. There is no discussion around it. No discussion is allowed. The banking sector have their own tools also of creating their own narrative around these reforms and how they can demonize it and how they can dismiss it. Okay, something like around the sacred deposit, the rights to access to the deposits, something that is absurd by, if you ask any independent economist or a financial expert, they tell you it's absurd, given Lebanese economy and our GDP and the all over situation. And they hold on to that right, and they keep propagating this narrative about the sacred deposits, despite the fact that they were the one in power when these deposits actually were wasted or robbed. It's crazy. It's crazy how much hypocrisy there is around it, and they control out of the media, and they control the mainstream media and the narrative
The banking
around
lobby.
it. Yeah, the banking lobby. So I'm not very hopeful. Giving him a hopeful person, as you said, but I'm not a very hopeful
Optimistic,
that we can reach only us as Lebanese to what I would say serious reform, and that we could bring back the banking sector to a healthy sector and the economy into a healthy status. But I'm sure that there's a kind of balance right now between what the international institutions and international community is pushing for versus what the political establishment is pushing for from inside. And this is why we're still, there is no decision. It's not, we didn't go either way yet, because the balance is there again. And still, Lebanon needs the IMF stamp to regain access to the financial markets and to regain trust with the banking sector. So they are stuck somehow, and unfortunately, this power balance is not allowing yet for a solution. I think by the time we elect a president, there will be a package, somehow, deal on the presidency with what will be what will happen with the financial sector reform.
And then, the question about, you being a lone ranger, but if I want to assume that you're optimistic, what are things that can be done as an MP from within Parliament that maybe may not be the economic file?
You can do also on the economic. We're doing a lot. And I can give you an example about the discussions that happened on the banker secrecy. Because when we entered the Parliament after the elections in 2022, the discussion was already started on how to amend the bank secrecy. And the Parliament is a place where you can do a lot in terms of discussions in the committee or in the General Assembly. And it's not because we are super powerful or smart, but actually the political parties, they are not doing their job. When you come in with a discussion and you have the bankers' lobbies, lawyers or representatives, or even the deputies who are in alliance with them, you can very easily argue back, and you can make a difference. And we were able to improve a lot the draft of the bank secrecy from where it was. It was really improved, despite the fact that it did not reach the level that it was accepted by the IMF. But I witnessed myself, and I took part in improving a lot of that draft. So it tells you that we can do a lot in the Parliament. And other than the financial sector, and on terms of accountability, I'm heading now a fact-finding subcommittee the parliament on a kind of an investigation on the شو اسمها هذه car registration authority. Okay, because there's a lot of question marks about corruption there, etc. And again, you can do a lot, and this is the first time that we have such a committee in the parliament, although it's in the bylaws. You can always do it, but يعني it is one very important experience, and I'm being fought back, and there's a lot of pushback by the political parties on that, and they're not being cooperative. But we're able to do a lot, and I'm sure that when we issue our final report, it will be a milestone in the history of Parliament, that it was the first time that we have a fact-finding committee of that sort, and it reached a transparent, well thought of and well-informed report that the Lebanese can use as a reference. And it's not just accusations in the media anymore. You have some arguments that are substantiated with evidence and witnesses, etc. So you have something. We will not be able to cover everything. We're not an investigative committee, but there are a lot that you can do from the parliament, and this, for me, is a different experience for us, specifically as people who come from outside the establishment, deputies who come from outside the establishment. They are able to learn more on details of governance and the system, how it works, and they become much more informed and much more convincing on the viability of engaging in politics and going to parliament, that you can make change, because many people don't believe that you can make change in this country, But the parliament is a good entry point for change, and we can prove this with time.
This is a good transition to my next question, and I only have a couple more before I open it up. I know people may be burning to ask questions, but I want to talk a little bit about you and your engagement in Parliament. You were elected parliamentarian with 13,281 preferential votes, right? In Beirut 2, you were hailed as the second most popular Sunni candidate.
No.
First?
As Sunni, but the second as a deputy.
Yeah. And I asked this because there was a vacuum at the time in the Sunni political space. So how do you react to this? And can you tell us a bit more about your background, how you became engaged politically, what motivates you, and how is your relationship with the Sunni establishment?
Okay. we don't like establishments altogether, so. But I think of course, many people would say that if Hariri had run, and I ran against the Future movement twice before, in municipality elections in 2016, where we got the 40% vote, and this was my starting point in politics per se. And then in 2018, I ran against them in parliament, and we got around 6,200 votes. That was half the threshold you needed to get to. And back then we didn't have no funding, no media whatsoever. So it was a good result given the situation. But I think if your question you're asking is, what if this establishment comes back? What would be my reaction? If Saad Hariri, like they were trying to promote, would come back?
Or also you being elected as a Sunni, what is your relationship with the Sunni establishment in general?
I'm a Sunni, yes, true, but also I'm Lebanese, and we are trying to really demonstrate or practice a different kind of politics here, okay? If I was going to compete over the establishment, the Sunni establishment, I would have taken a different track, But I personally believe, and a lot of my group and friends who we work together in this, we believe that we should be doing things differently. We shouldn't be the starting point is a sectarian base. What we need to have is more a diverse, addressing actually or acknowledging the diversity of votes and the diversity of support you can get from all the confessions, and represent the national interest altogether, the Lebanese interest, okay, not the sect interest. And there's, I think, here a roadmap, or is a mechanism that Lebanese believe in, that you start from yourself, then you go through the sect to the national. But I don't agree at all with that. We should directly go to the national, and then you will have acceptance from all national. And I think this is what we're missing in Lebanon, and this is what we need. We don't need more sectarian deputies or political parties. What we need is more national interests discussed across all factions, across all sects. I think we need to bring unity to the Lebanese, find the common interest, even if we diverge on certain choices or strategies with the national interest, but at least I'm representing this national interest in the way I see it, and that's what's important. And this is what we can unite, I think, the Lebanese over that. I personally come from a professional background, like I said, and I was never. I remember I tried to join. I was interested in politics, going back. So 1995, when I was university, it was back. Rafiq al-Hariri has just entered politics. Okay, and there was a movement. So I decided. I was very excited. I wanted to join. I remember I joined 2 meetings back then, and then decided that's not my place. I never joined politics, but I kept in touch and observing and interest until 2015. So, yeah, maybe that distance helped me a little bit to not to be immersed too much in the establishment. I never felt like I was able to blend or to be part of the establishment until I found my way, and I found Beirut Madinati, which for me it was very refreshing, that experience, to see how many non-sectarian Lebanese there are, and it allowed us to come together. And from there on, I think the group and this movement is growing, and it's gaining ground. It's taking time, but I think we are on the right track.
One last question. It relates to what you're saying. You're part of this reform cohort that was elected 13 at some point, not 12, and that is quite the motley crew. Despite being elected on the basis of a common perspective that the ruling establishment is really driving the country to ruin, not much has united you since. So can you just, in closing, before we open it up, talk a little bit about these dynamics and maybe what's preventing you all from being more united?
طيب. If you go one step back, before this united bloc of change MPs, we have to recall the 2022 elections time. Okay, there was a lot of momentum after the revolution of 2019. People were very thirsty for hope to make a change, especially after what happened in August 4, the port explosion. There was a lot of anger. Okay, people wanted to retaliate from the establishment, and the opportunity was there in 2022. That was the objective. We needed to create a hole in the wall of the establishment. So there was united or some kind of a coalition lists to confront the establishment, but we never expected to get this number of MPs, to be honest. So the main objective was to be successful in winning, to demonstrate that we're able to win and we can beat the establishment. But once we won and we were in the parliament, a different set of expectations came in. You need to be more united. You need to achieve. You need to be more political. You need to achieve and deliver so and so. But this was not part of the plan. You know, we were not prepared for that. We don't have the tools. We don't have the political infrastructure. We don't have the funding. We don't have the organization. So from there on, it was a different challenge. And I think we have to accept that from the time of the elections till today, it is it was not very natural what happened. It was very normal that a lot of divergences would show up. A lot of fragmentation would happen. It's natural, it's normal. We have to accept it. But what we need to learn also is to create some kind of political, like I said, at the Lebanese and national level, even within the change MPs or the bloc, a kind of a settlement and agreement on differences and what we agree on, and commit to it. And this is something that unfortunately I don't find a lot in the culture of in our culture as Lebanese when we talk politics. So we're not able to find this middle ground or the common ground and agree on it and commit to it. And it's going to take a bit of time before a lot of us agree and accept this fact and then build on it. But I think, in terms of objective, many of the deputies of change were able to demonstrate a different kind of politics. And I think by itself, this is an achievement to the Lebanese to see a younger generation of politicians who are trying to do politics differently, despite the overwhelming challenges that we have in terms of at the popular level or at the establishment or institutions level or even at the financial level. It's not easy to be confronting all that alone, but yet many of the deputies, I think they are doing a wonderful job in pushing back for Lebanese interests in the parliament.
Thanks, Ibrahim.